When we think about the Nintendo 64, Mario 64 is considered by many to be the killer app. Even to this day, it's rated as one of the most important and influential games in video game history. But for me, another game on the N64 would be just as important that would showcase the power of the hardware and firmly position the Nintendo 64 as a 3D powerhouse. That game is Wave Race 64. Developed by Nintendo EAD and released just a few months after the launch of the Nintendo 64 in 1996, Wave Race 64 is one of the most recognizable games going around, thanks to its amazing water effects and environments which look stunning on the home console. Realistic looking water and waves look and feel incredible as you race your jet ski around each of the 8 courses available in the game. Each course has different water conditions ranging from the mostly still Drake Lake to the choppy seas of Marine Fortress. The technology Nintendo used for the game for its time is quite incredible, and it still holds up to this day. Wave Race 64, however, was not the first jet ski game. On the original Game Boy in 1992, Nintendo EAD released Wave Race. The player controls a jet ski around a water park in a 2D top-down game similar to games like Micro Machines. While the Game Boy had its limitations, the gameplay is spot on, with a good feeling of jet ski racing on water and suitable inertia when taking corners. The game was not a smash hit for Nintendo, but it did sell well enough for them to use the Wave Race name to prompt the sequel on the Nintendo 64. During early development of the game, Wave Race started out as a tech demo on the Silicon Graphics workstations as Nintendo EAD's programmers, led by Shinya Takahashi, were transitioning from 2D to 3D during the early days of the N64, known as Project Reality. In 1995, an early demo of Wave Race was shown at Nintendo's Space World show. The game would initially feature boats instead of jet skis. Tim Stamper, the owner of Rare, who had a close working relationship with Nintendo, suggested jet skis, and Shigeru Miyamoto would greenlight the change. Miyamoto was quoted as saying, "Boats look pretty good at the show, but I didn't think that Wave Race 64 would be unique from similar games on other systems if we use boats. Jet skis can show many maneuvers that work well in the realistic water of Wave Race 64. The change to jet skis would be the right move, and Wave Race 64 would be a hit on the Nintendo 64, with the game offering jaw-dropping wave physics and tight controls that make you feel like you're powering a jet ski on water. The wave physics aren't there for show either, they are the focus of the gameplay. The jet ski controls feel natural. For example, on Marine Fortress, the choppy waters can make it difficult to control the jet ski if you're caught between waves. Maneuvering the jet ski around waves to not miss a buoy can also be quite challenging. Physics also plays a huge part. For example, if we stand still in the water, we can see that not only the jet ski bobs up and down with the waves, but other objects that are submerged in the water do as well. Not only this, the alpha channel is used to good effect to display transparencies. For example, in some stages we can see the seafloor, sand, and sea life underwater. It's a stunning presentation. Technically, Wave Race 64 is a masterpiece and still holds up today. In fact, it was just released on the Nintendo Switch Online service, and many original fans and now new fans can experience the game. It still holds up well. While the use of water rendering and physics have long been surpassed, Wave Race 64's use of water physics is still very impressive. So how was this achieved on the Nintendo 64? On first glance, it might appear that this is some type of sorcery, that realistic waves like this are even possible on the N64. But in reality, the waves in Wave Race are mostly scripted to trigger specific wave patterns at different parts of the course that you're currently playing on. And this is easily proven on a stage like Drake Lake. The mostly still water shows that the jet ski doesn't actually produce any water ripples at all, other than some static textures to indicate movement in the water. In contrast, a full fluid simulation on the Nintendo 64 would be much too expensive to accomplish due to the limitations of the hardware. So the developers would use tricks to create realistic looking water physics, buoyancy, and dynamic wave generation. On first glance, the wave generation may appear to look complex, but what's essentially happening here is that the water surface is simply a mesh of polygons. This can be illustrated if we load up any Nintendo 64 emulator and show the game in wireframe mode. You can see the triangles going off to the distance, and you can also note that the sea life is visible underneath and the birds are above the horizon. Given that the Nintendo 64 can push over 100,000 polygons per second, the water plane is only using a few hundred triangles. By applying math calculations, each vertex on each triangle can be adjusted to simulate ripples and waves in the water. Color and alpha adjustments are also applied. If we take a look at the interval screen, even without any texture mapping applied, the effect is quite convincing. Going back to the courses in the game, note that the waves are generated in set intervals and are triggered when you reach a certain part of the course. This wave here is generated by a sine wave pattern on a set interval. We can also get some insight into the inner workings of this by examining the source code for WaveRace 64 that was found in GigaLeak. Now I should mention that although the source code was leaked out, it's incomplete with only header files available but no C source code. And while hackers have managed to reconstruct ROM images from GigaLeak by applying those binary object files, it's not possible to compile up your own version of WaveRace. With that said, we can find out more information about the wave generation if we examine this header file. The init_c function sets up the water for each stage. The move_c function handles movement. Move_c is likely an overarching function that has conditions based on the current stage that handles wave generation. We know this to be true because the main game loop contains a simple state machine. The AI data is set up first, then movement is applied for the camera and the jet ski, then a call to move_c. Waving_c sets up the x and z coordinates, the amplitude of the wave, its frequency, and its transparency. Push_c_trig creates triangle meshes as we saw previously with coordinates and a unique identifier. Waving_big generates big waves and takes a big wave structure, which we can see here. Big wave takes position coordinates, horizontal and vertical heights, the total number of pieces that make up the wave, as well as the time value for its frequency. This is all fed as display lists to the Nintendo 64's RDP, and the results are realistic looking waves. Note, however, that waves are only generated fairly close to the rider. Take this example in the distance. We can only see one of the buoys moving, but there is no actual wave being generated. The buoy even further in the distance appears to be static with no movement. However, when we approach both, new waves are generated and physics are applied. Most players would probably never notice unless the game is running on emulation. And finally, we can see a sample of some of the textures that were applied to the water mesh. As you can see, they're fairly basic and rudimentary by themselves, and they certainly don't paint the full picture. But combined with natural wave generation, vertex translation, blending and transparencies and filtering makes the waves in WaveRace 64 one of the most beautiful effects that we saw in video games. The waves in WaveRace are still talked about today, and while I did very much enjoy the sequel, WaveRace Blue Storm on the GameCube, it was a much more capable system in terms of power to handle the wave physics and water. It's not a bad game, but it just didn't have the same wow factor of the original N64 version. Of course, that's just my opinion. But in the end, I do hope you enjoyed this deep dive, no pun intended, of the waves in WaveRace 64. And for those people that are enjoying WaveRace for the first time on the Nintendo Switch Online service, I do hope you find the game as awesome and memorable as I did back in 1996 when I first picked it up. And if you like this episode and you want to see more of it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But as always, we are going to leave it here for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to put a like on it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.